Hello everyone, welcome back to Coders United. Today we're going to be discussing performance hooks. And the first hook we're going to talk about is the use memo hook. So to start out, we are going to create our React app, and I'm going to do this using the create React app command. Next, we can go ahead and change directories into our app, and we'll boot it up by running npm start. Okay, now that it's booted up successfully, we can go to our source folder in our project, and we can start off by importing the use memo hook up at the top of the file. Okay, so now we have access to the necessary hooks. We are going to create our scenario. So we'll start off by creating an app component. And this is going to render another component for us. So we're going to start off by creating a count variable and a set count modifier and putting the initial value to 0. And then we are going to return some UI. So as I mentioned before, we need to create another component which we can render with an app. So we will have a to-dos component. And this to-dos component we can simply take and put it as the child of the app component. So from here, we can go ahead and pass in a prop. We'll call it value. And we're going to pass in the count variable for that prop. Splendid. Next, we're going to add a button, which will allow us to increment the value of count. We can do this by setting up an onClick event. Each time the button's clicked, we're going to use the set count modifier to update the count plus 1. So now comes the value, which we can extrapolate here from the parameters. And we're going to start off by setting up the calculation for the to-dos. So this is where use memo comes into play. And it takes in 2 arguments. The first argument is the calculation function we want to run, and the second one is the list of dependencies. So I'm going to pass in value as the dependency, and what's going to happen is we're going to set up a variable called all, which will be equal to 0 at first. Then we're going to perform an expensive calculation. So for today's example, I'm simply going to iterate through a loop 1 million times. I'm going to increase this variable value. And from here, the beauty of the use memo hook is it will look at the value dependency and it will only perform this expensive calculation again if that value is changed. Otherwise, it will use a cached version of that value. So just for clarity, we'll add our log here so we can see what's going on under the hood. And now we've calculated the value for the to-dos, we can render that. So I'm going to return a header and we'll parse the value of the total that is returned from our calculation. Finally, we need to add the value that was passed in from our parent component here. And we should be ready to test this out. So we can go ahead and save our work and head back to the browser. And from here, when we click the add button, we can see that it recalculates that result each time. You might notice that it's logging twice each time, but not to worry because this is actually a known and expected feature of strict mode, and it only happens in development. So you could just ignore that double logging for now. And next, we're going to go ahead and extend this example a little more by making it to where the count doesn't update. And so now you're going to see that each time I click the add button, it's just simply using the cached value and it's not performing that expensive calculation again and again. So another performance hook we can use is called use callback. And this allows us to cache our functions and so they aren't reinitialized between different renders. So to see this in action, let's drop in our app component and let's create a function called handle click, and we'll use the use callback hook, which takes in two arguments, just like use memo. First argument is the function that we want to run, and the second is the dependency in which to run this function. Okay, and so what we're going to do is each time handle click runs, we're going to add 1 to the count. So this allows us to remove the button from our app component and pass in a prop for that function event called onClick. And then we can drop in the button inside our child component to-dos. And then as for the function, we're going to use the one that was passed in called onClick and invoke that each time that the button's clicked. So now each time, instead of reinitializing that function value between each re-render of the child and parent, it will only do it when the value of count has actually changed, improving the overall performance. And that's it. So if you enjoyed this video today and you want to see others like it, go ahead and hit that like button, and we'll see you next time.